PlayStation CEOs Hideki Nishino and Herman Hulst officially reveal how new two business strategies are impacting the studio and console plans. We're going to talk about everything that has been said, including PS5 Pro production, the plans for future consoles, and PlayStation Studios going into the future. All that in today's video. Please like the video, subscribe to never miss a PlayStation update, and share the video to help grow our community. In their first interview since assuming their new roles in June, Nishino and Hulst speak to Variety about how their partnership works. They argue that the scale of the company behind God of War and Spider-Man franchises has grown to require two operations that each need specialized leadership, a platform business run by Nishino and a studio business headed by Hulst. So we're talking about Nishino handling the hardware side of things, right? The platform side of things. And we're talking about Hulst handling like the studios, the gaming studios, PlayStation studios in general, whether it be with PlayStation Studios, the games, or their entertainment side of things with film and TV adaptations as well. So that's the split. We have Nishino on the hardware platform side, and we have Hulst on the side of handling the games and everything revolving around the IP. Nishino goes on to say this is not co-CEOs, it's two CEOs for the company. Herman runs his thing, I run my thing, and then we get together to talk about how to grow the business. Nishino acknowledges the tension inherent in the structure, but spins it as a healthy dynamic. Quotes, growing the business for success has a conflict as well. How we impact each other or how we want to sacrifice or not. It's a balance, it's an opportunity and a risk part. And Hulst estimates that 80% of their day-to-day time is spent managing their discrete areas. In quotes, it's really nice to have two devs at the helm. We both have engineering degrees. We're both pretty hands-on. He says, adding, there needs to be huge trust, and we've worked together for a very long time. So there's obviously chemistry between these two devs, and they're in such a big role for PlayStation that obviously they need to make sure that they're on the same page as far as things go. But I do think that having the two roles would be super beneficial as long as they're both doing their job exceptionally well, right? So I think even if you look at Apple, the way Apple does it, not saying that Apple does it the best way, but look at how successful they are. They have specific teams for everything. They have a team for the watch. They have a team for the headphones. They have a team for the phones. They have a team for the tablets. They have teams separated all along the board. They don't have just one massive team working on everything. So in this case, if you look at it in this aspect, I know we're talking about CEOs here and not just development teams. We're looking at one person heading platforms and one person heading the software side of things or franchises, IPs, stuff like that. So it just seems like a good split, and then everybody can focus all their efforts on that specific thing and do the best work they can do rather than feeling like they're drowning in how much needs to be done. And it's important to note that they say Hulst and Nishino have adopted a show don't tell leadership style at PlayStation. It's important we convey our strategy, says Hulst, but at the end of the day, I am with the creators a big chunk of time, and I love that. I think that it's great that they're more focused on showing what they have rather than just talking to us about it, because it's all good and well when you get us excited, but if you can't deliver on that excitement, then that's a problem. And we know that that happens to be a case with some other places. And not to like rag on Xbox, but Xbox is very well known for talking a lot about what they're doing, but not always delivering on the promises that they make. And so I think PlayStation being very cautious of that is a good thing. Variety asks, with the PS5 Pro coming out very soon after we publish this story, I wanted to ask about the timing of that versus what will be the actual next-gen device. Are you waiting for Nintendo to make the first move with a Switch 2 announcement before you will get there? And what is the plan for rolling out Pro and making it clear who the product is for versus who the actual next generation device will be for? Nishino says, when we were selling PS4 Pro, in addition to the PS4, 20% of our customers actually got the PS4 Pro. It was not just about highly engaged users, actually. New users come to PlayStation to get the PS4 Pro as well. So we started working on PS5 Pro even before PS5 launched. It was another 5-year project for us. So prior to PS5's launch, they were already working on the PS5 Pro. And that's not like a huge shock, right? Obviously, they work on hardware well ahead of time. And so this was a situation where they were already looking at PS5 Pro as an option. He goes on to say there are technologies we can grow up in 3 years' time or 5 years' time. So the innovation and technology advancement is more quicker in a modern world. He says, I don't think we'd go every year updates, but there are things we can package together to bring the greatest things into game console segment range. So that's the vision. And I think that's phenomenal to even have that mindset, right? Because a lot of us, we want the most recent hardware, right? Like, and we're willing to pay that price tag. Not for everybody, of course, but I think if you give that option to people, especially a 3 to 4 year gap I think that people will be very open-minded to upgrading, because at that point, you can make substantial increases to the hardware. Mind you, this is supposed to be a PS5 console, just a mid-gen refresh, so it's not a next-gen console. So we can't expect that they're going to go revamp the entire system, but they're going to make it more powerful and at least still fit the confined space and specs of a PS5 to some degree, right? They can't go and just make this thing like so much more powerful that the PS5 is kind of in a place where it becomes like the Series S in some way. He also says we need to make sure that the 10-year-old generation cycle continues to be going as well. So looking like a 10-year gen cycle for the PS5. I actually think it could even be longer. If you look at PS4, PS4 is actually like 11 years now, and they're still making games for it. Maybe the exclusives aren't coming out for it, but they are still making games for it to a degree. So it's one of those situations, especially with the PS5 having that SSD, right? And the loading systems and all that in place not being a problem anymore, because PS4 was on a regular hard drive. Now we're looking at SSDs. This probably means that the PS5 can last a lot longer, especially the architecture that it's on, and that it just seems to be more scalable, I'd say. So if you bought a PS5, you're looking at a longer time, a much longer time, as far as being able to use it. Variety asks, how do you balance that on development side, knowing when certain devices are going to hit and what titles you are ready to announce or not? I'm very excited for Ghost of Yote next year, but I feel like there isn't another really big one you have announced yet that would show a need to be played on PS5 Pro. Do we have big title announcements coming soon to Pro or for the next gen? Hull says we spend a lot of time doing portfolio planning, and platform is a big part of that. So when we were doing our planning from early stages of PlayStation 5, it was really important to get really high quality titles on the PS5 right out of the gate. And that served us well and bought us the position of PlayStation 5 that's really, really good. And to be honest, it's a very non-answer, which I actually don't like it's a non-answer. I like what Variety asked. Variety's asking, hey, you're selling us this PS5 Pro. You've only showed us Ghost of Yote. What about the future? And Hall's obviously not going to announce a new PS5 game. That's just not going to happen. That would make no sense for them to go ahead and do that. But it also doesn't really give us an answer of what the future holds for them. And I think in due time we'll get that answer. But yeah, it's a very much a non-answer. He does say a lot more in here, just talking about how the developers really play with the hardware, right? And when developing the hardware, they talk to their developers, their in-house developers, and try to figure out how they can complement their talents, right? So giving them the resources and the power to be able to do what they want to do. And so things like Astrobot, which was a pack-in, could have been an experiment and then just came to be a full experience on the PS5. And that's just one of the examples that he gave. Variety asks, when it comes to the adaptation side, which was obviously revved up a lot at PlayStation over the years, with The Last of Us Season 2, potentially Season 3 after that, and the God of War and Horizon TV shows in the works, where are those projects right now? And on the game side, are you looking at releasing new games in those franchises along those shows? And Hulse gives a pretty extended, response. I didn't feel there was a ton there as far as what I'm interested in. There is something that he did say here that I did highlight, and he says, I think going forward, we'll become increasingly meticulous and rigorous about our franchising. And I think that kind of goes back to the successes and the failures that they have, whether that be with IP, creating new games like Concord, or whether it be through TV shows and stuff like that, where it doesn't pan out, it doesn't come even release in some cases, or in some cases it's not that great, right? Like Uncharted I would say it was probably a miss. It might have been. I felt like it wasn't really talked about. Like The Last of Us was such a grand slam, right? So I feel like they're going to be a little more careful. Twisted Metal did have decent reception as well. So I feel like they're going to be a little more careful about that as well. And lastly, Variety says you all underwent rounds of layoffs earlier this year, similar to those that hit the entire gaming industry in 2024. While Microsoft recently had new ones, you all have taken Concord offline, and you had additional cuts at Bungie. What is the current outlook for PlayStation and expectations of studios and games being shut down moving forward? And this one, I'm actually going to read all of what Herman Hall said, which was it's not long. But he says a lot here, and I think it's very important because this is something that just happened recently. So they're gonna wanna highlight this for sure. Hull says, I will say a few things on that. It's our duty to look at our resource planning and make sure that we run a sustainable business. That's part of being CEO. We never take that lightly because we know these people personally, and it's very close to our hearts and the teams and good working atmospheres. But yes, we've had some layoffs, but it's also important to realize that on the content side, PlayStation Studios is now a much bigger organization than when it started. It's grown tremendously, and that is organic growth that our existing teams, I think, hired quite aggressively, as well as through mergers and acquisitions. So the organization, the employment is much greater now than it was, let's say, for example, 5 years ago. And look, it goes without saying that, yes, PlayStation has grown a lot. They've grown substantially since, obviously, PS1, where now they have tons of studios. They have some of the biggest hits possible out there. Not to say that they have the biggest, but they have pretty big IP. God of War, The Last of Us, guys. These are massive IP, and yes, they're definitely grown a lot in size, and they require a lot more to manage. I do think he's a little bit dismissive when he talks about feeling that the existing teams hired aggressively, and also talked about mergers and acquisitions, but it didn't sound like accountability was taken on the leadership side of things, which I think was not really fair. But I guess there's whole PR business speak. Like, I imagine they go through rigorous testing as far as answering questions before they even take these interviews, and they know the questions and all that stuff. So I didn't expect them to say, yeah, man, we made a mistake. We hired too many people, or we aggressively started buying up studios because it was like a panic buy. He's not going to say those things, but yeah, obviously it goes without saying that is something that happened, even if he doesn't say it. But it just seemed like he kind of passed the onus on to the studios and the teams that were hiring to kind of alleviate himself off of that. But I think being a studio head like he was, surely he had some sort of say and some sort of control over what was happening. He managed PlayStation Studios. Like, he managed it. You can't tell me he didn't really have a massive say in it. So I do feel Hulse was a little bit dismissive there. But again, like, these things, these questions, they know them well ahead of time, and when they answer them, it goes through rigorous testing. I don't think he just talks off the cuff about what he's going to say, right? He already knows what he's going to say well ahead of time. And yeah, and the truth is, as far as all these questions go, right, and what they're talking about, yeah, in a lot of cases, they're going to be dismissive. A lot of cases, they're not going to address every question because, well, the truth is they can't do that, right? They have plans in place. They can't announce games from studios when it's up to those games to be ready to do that, right? And they also don't want to do it in a variety interview, right? That's something you want to do on a stage that you are ready for. So I feel like as far as that goes, it makes sense why some of these questions were answered the way they are. Ultimately, I walk away from this interview thinking a couple things. Number one, I think it's a beneficial joint CEO type of position, even though let's say it's like two CEOs, one for one side of the business and one for the other side of the business. I think that'll be beneficial. I do think that that's the way to go. And my other thought is that hopefully, based on all these experiences and cleaning up the big messes that have been made, that PlayStation will begin to be a little more choosy with what they decide to go forward with, and hopefully create more successful hits and more, new IP. Hopefully, I want to see them continue to advance creativity, continue to advance hardware, obviously, and they're doing the hardware side of things. Like, look at PSSR, how good it is comparatively speaking. Also think about how the fact of PSSR being as good as it is with its first iteration, like, there's so many things to take into account here, and we're still early to see the effects of a joint CEO type of deal. But I think by next gen, we should start to really see the effects of Hulse and Nishino. I think we should truly see that. And I do hope that it is a situation where it takes off and they really deliver on the promises that they're making. Ultimately, it's a wait and see approach at this point. We don't know what's going to happen, but they need to, first of all, deliver on the games, continue to deliver on the games. And the hardware, I am confident in the hardware, and we'll know more come this week when I buy it myself, and we'll talk about it, and we'll do some testing on my side of things as well as you will see people all over the internet doing testing, and it'll be out there for us to truly see what PSSR is like and what the PS5 Pro is like. But let me know what you guys think about all this new information. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and share the video to help grow our community. I thank you all for watching. Take care.